Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you the how to play video for Palm Island, which is coming to Kickstarter in February. You can find the exact date in the description below, and if it's live, you can find the link in the description below. Palm Island is a game for 1 to 2 players, 3 or 4 if you have a second set, that is played right in the palm of your hand. Using just a small deck of 17 cards, players will transform and upgrade each of their cards to gain more resources, abilities, and of course victory points. The game ends after 8 rounds, and if you have more points than your opponent, or if you've beaten your previous high score, you win. To begin, the player first collects her deck of 17 cards. Make sure the decks consist of the following: 3 boats, 3 loggers, 3 quarry, 2 houses, 2 temple, 1 market, 1 large market, 1 blacksmith, and a round tracker card. Each card has 4 positions known as states. The face-up top section is a card's current state and is the active area. Each card has a small white arrow in the top left corner of its initial beginning state. The player should make sure the cards are arranged so that this state is on the front and top of all cards at the beginning of the game. The player shuffles her deck at the beginning of the game, making sure not to rotate or flip any of the cards in the deck. She then searches the deck for the round tracker card, and when she finds it, she takes it out and places it in the back of the deck. Note that leaving the round tracker card in the deck for the initial shuffle is simply a matter of convenience for portability's sake. If the player wishes, she's free to remove it from the deck, shuffle the deck, and then place the round tracker in the back. Before starting the game, the player is free to take note of the position of all of the cards in her deck. While playing, the player will always hold the deck in her left hand. To begin play, she draws 1 card from the top of the deck into her right hand. The player may then interact with either the card in her right hand or the card on top of the deck in her left hand. There are 3 possible actions available to a player during the game: store, rotate, or flip. In order to use one of these 3 actions, the player must be able to pay the listed cost. In this case, store is free, rotate costs 1 fish, and flip costs 1 fish. At the very beginning of the game, the players will only be able to use free actions. It's also important to note a player may only ever do 1 action at a time. So if the player had enough resources to do more than 1 action, she still could only do 1. Let's discuss these 3 actions in more detail. When a player activates the store action, she must pay the cost, turn the card 90 degrees clockwise, and then place the card in the back of the deck, with the resource hanging out. A stored resource may be used later to pay for an action. The player may have no more than 4 resource cards stored at any time. However, these 4 cards may contain any number of resources on each card. If the player wishes to store a resource card when 4 are already stored, then she must first pay 1 currently stored, rotating it counterclockwise, in order to make room for the new card. When a player activates the rotate action, she pays the cost, rotates the card 180 degrees, and then places it in the back of the deck. When a player activates the flip action, she pays the cost, and then flips the card over, and then places it in the back of the deck. It's important to remember that when a player rotates a card, the card is not flipped as well. And when a player flips a card, it is not also rotated. If the player has a card in her right hand and uses any of the actions listed on the card in her left hand, the card in her right hand stays where it is. If the player either does not wish to interact with either card or can't interact with either card, the card in her hand must be discarded to the back of the deck. She then can draw from the top of the deck and reassess her options. Let's discuss in a little more detail about paying for actions. To pay for an action's cost, the player must use a stored resource card, as I've indicated before, but make sure that when you rotate it counterclockwise. Also, make sure the card maintains its position within the deck. Once that cost is paid, the player may go ahead and take the action indicated. The player may only pay for one action at a time, which means if a card has more resources than the player needs to use an action, those resources will be lost. So in this case, these 3 logs are more than the 1 log and 1 fish necessary, so they would be lost if the player really wanted to use that action. If you see the symbols grouped together like this, it means and. So in this case, 1 log and 1 fish to perform this rotate action. If you see the symbols separated by a slash, it means or. So to store the market, you could use a log or a fish. If the player ever were to draw a stored resource card, that card must immediately be lost and spent by rotating it counterclockwise 90 degrees and placing it in the back of the deck. When the player draws the round tracker into her hand, she must immediately flip it to the next higher number and then place it in the back of the deck. When moving from the 4th to the 5th round, simply go back to the number 1 and then go through 4 more rounds to the 8th round. Once the player has completed all 8 rounds, she will add up the victory points located in the top right corner of the active section of each card, and whatever the final score, that's her score for the game. The 2-player game mostly plays exactly like the solo game, with both players working through their decks simultaneously. However, at the end of the round, the players stop to take additional actions involving bonus cards. Bonus cards may be placed on a table or in a central area for all players if that's available. However, Palm Island is designed to be played tableless, and so it is recommended that one player be chosen to hold the bonus cards in her deck. The chosen player will take the bonus cards and place them just before the round tracker in her deck. This, of course, should occur after the player has already shuffled her deck. When the player purchases the bonus card, she will rotate it 180 degrees, so the victory points are now the active section, and then place it directly after the round marker in her deck. In a competitive game, the first player to reach her round tracker gets her choice of which bonus card to purchase, if she's able to purchase any. The other player then purchases a bonus card for her deck if she can, and if there are 3 or 4 players, purchases continue in the order that players reach their round tracker. The cards for advanced competitive play will be a stretch goal that backers may obtain during the campaign. If the players choose to play with these advanced competitive bonus cards, they will completely replace the basic competitive bonus cards we just discussed a moment ago. Instead, 3 advanced competitive cards will be chosen at random during the setup and placed just before the round tracker as previously described. Then, when a player purchases one, she'll rotate it 180 degrees just as before, place it just before her round tracker, but leave it peeking out to help her remember which advanced competitive card she currently has active. It's important to note a player may only have 1 active at a time. In a 3-player game, 4 advanced cards would be selected. In a 4-player game, 5 advanced cards will be selected. Cooperative mode works much like competitive play, except there is no race to gain victory points. Players will instead spend resources to prepare their island for one of these impending disasters. Players choose one disaster and place it immediately before the round tracker of one player's deck. Each disaster has a difficulty level shown here. The players must successfully avoid the disaster by paying the listed cost and working their way around to finally defeating it. At the end of each round, players will collectively check to see if they have the resources necessary to pay this cost. If they don't, they'll continue to the next round. If they do, they will perform the action and then continue to the next round. And as you might expect, at the end of the following round, they'll check again. If they do have it, they will then flip it over. And in the next round, if they have it again, then they've successfully defeated the famine. It's not necessary to complete one at the end of each round. Instead, the players simply have to have the famine completed before the end of the 8th round. If they don't, then all players have lost. However, if the players have successfully completed the famine or whichever disaster they've chosen, then the players have won, and the lowest score of all the players is the score for the entire group. And that's how you play Palm Island. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my channel, consider subscribing. Go back Palm Island on Kickstarter if this interested you. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.